Well, yesterday's budget also includes billions for the green economy and improving government services. But on the other side of the ledger, a promise to find $15 billion in savings on everything from consultants to travel. So how feasible is this fiscal plan? Kevin Page is well suited to help answer that question. He was Canada's first parliamentary budget officer and is now president and CEO of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa. Kevin, good to see you again on CPAC. Thanks for being with me.
Good to be with you, Andrew.
So the finance minister says government spending will be more focused and more efficient, but we do have more spending compared to the fall update, including the plan for generating clean growth. So what's your overall sense of the government's fiscal position as you read this budget?
Yeah, so I think our fiscal, there's two ways to look at this, Andrew, in terms of our general fiscal position. One is that, our deficits, our debt to GDP ratio, I think relative to other countries still looks quite strong. Deficits in the $40 billion range, about 1.5 percentage points of GDP. Debt relative to GDP, in just a little bit above 40%. And I think, when we compare ourselves with the United States or with the UK, those numbers are, we're doing much better than our colleagues. I think another way of looking at it is that the situation, because of the weaker economic outlook, because of the additional spending, in this budget, we're seeing, deficits and debt go up. I think there are some people that remember that in the late 1990s, we worked really hard to get the deficit and debt to GDP, debt numbers down. And it seems like we're losing some of that fiscal discipline, and this could cost us, down the road, when we next face the next sort of global shock, whether it's a financial crisis or a global pandemic or something else. So, I think, but still we're in relatively good shape, but there's not a lot of discipline still built into this budget.
Okay, so let's look at where the government is trying to save money. They're promising a 15% cut over 5 years for management consulting and travel. They say that'll provide $7 billion. There's also a pledge for all departments and agencies and crown corporations to cut their spending by 3%. The government says that will save another $8 billion. So what's the risk to the government, to their fiscal position you talk about, if they can't meet those targets?
Yeah, so, clearly, if those targets prove to be difficult to achieve, and they are significant in terms of the magnitude of those reductions, we'll end up with a higher deficit. And I think that is likely. It's probably even probable. If you look at the type, where they're trying to focus these cuts, it's on something called sort of direct program spending, which includes the operations of government, includes, a lot of the transfers that departments provide. Over and above the transfers that are provided to persons and governments. So, it's about roughly $40 billion when we go to the budget document. They're saying that they could effectively find $20 billion in annual savings 5 years out. So that's like 10%. A 10% cut on that particular spending base is very significant. So it's going to be hard for the government to achieve these savings, and there'll have to be. My guess is there's going to have to be reductions in the size of the public service, and there could be service implications as well.
Right, and public sector unions are already warning that you can't cut this much without compromising services to the public. So, is that a concern you share?
Yeah, I think there's. I think there's just really a lack of transparency, Andrew, in the document. So just the lack of transparency by itself raises concerns. The government says it's going to refocus spending, but what do they mean by that? Where will these cuts be placed? Like, what principles will drive, the cuts across various sorts of departments? Again, and just back to the math or the basic arithmetic. Basic operations of government, which are, again, part of direct program spending, are probably in the neighborhood of $130 billion. Half of that is personnel. And, the government's basically saying it could hold it constant for 5 years in the current plan. And how do you hold that constant in the current plan when we're going to have, when unions are going to be asking for, increases to compensate for inflation? And when there's other pressures, inflationary pressures on non-salary kinds of issues as well, materials, supplies, et cetera. So I mean, I think it's an area of the budget where there's significant fiscal risk, and there's just a lack of transparency in the budget right now. So I think it's incumbent on the government, Minister Forche, the president of the Treasury Board, to come forth with the plan. Let people see like how will we achieve these savings.
Right. Now, the previous Conservative government undertook a similar exercise more than a decade ago when you were the parliamentary budget officer. How does that experience compare to what's being proposed now?
Yeah, it feels like deja vu, Andrew. It's again back. I mean, it was a number of years ago. We were just coming out of the global financial crisis. I think it was their 2011 budget. They said the 5 years within 5 years they wanted to get back to balance. They chose, like the government, to freeze direct program spending. They did not. They were not transparent, I think, with Parliament. I think we went into the 2015 election, and obviously we know the electoral outcome. Prime Minister Trudeau actually won that election. So these cuts were not really that popular. We did get back to balance. But then we found like it was almost like a surge in spending, certainly with respect to personnel spending, took place, in that post 2015 period. So we wondered like whether like just those cuts that were made by Prime Minister Harper, by the late Finance Minister Flaherty, they did not seem to be sustainable.
All right, well, we'll see how the process unfolds this time around. Kevin Page, always great to have your insight on the numbers during budget season. Thanks for this.
Great to be with you, Andrew.